I'm a retired peace officer from the state of California. Over the course of my career, I have arrested quite a few people for violations of law. Most of these people went through an adjudication process for their crimes, and that's criminal justice speak for court, and were ultimately sentenced. What I found during my tenure is that prior to being incarcerated, all of these convicted persons were viewed by society as a whole as criminals. They violated the life, liberty, or property of another person, and as such, deserved their just deserts. And this, too, is criminal justice speak for deserved punishment for a crime. No one really questioned this process or the idea that these people who broke the law needed to be punished for their misbehavior, and in many cases, needed to be removed from the rest of society because they were dangerous. However, there's been a growing trend where the idea of punishment is being replaced with rehabilitation and the newest correctional concept, restorative justice. And as a result, in the eyes of many, criminals have now become victims of the criminal justice system. In this episode of Office of the Patriot, I'm going to discuss the social phenomenon of criminal to victim and unravel the reasons behind this perplexing mindset and its potential consequences for our society. Hello, and welcome to the Office of the Patriot. In this office, I try to make sense out of the nonsense of the progressive left and rhino right. If you are a subscriber, thank you for your continued viewership. It is appreciated. If you are a returning viewer, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future presentations. And if you are a first-time visitor to my channel, well, congratulations on finding it. It's usually hidden by the YouTube algorithm. However, I do hope you find the content worth coming back for. My name is Myron Ybarra, and I'm your host. Have you ever wondered why some people perceive criminals as victims after they've been incarcerated? I mean, 1 minute they're on the news wearing an orange jumpsuit in court being sentenced, and no one disputes that they're criminals. And then the next minute, they're in prison and now viewed as victims of the system. It's a complex and controversial topic that sparks passionate debate across the United States. So let's delve into why and try to uncover the reasons behind this increasingly bizarre viewpoint. I found that most of these beliefs stem from either misconceptions of the criminal justice process, perceived incarceration conditions, and or information provided by the criminal, which is obviously biased. The first reason is the public's belief in the effectiveness of rehabilitation. And this belief is so powerful, it's been lobbied for, and now as a result, is a major component of virtually every single correctional program in the country. Billions of dollars have been spent on the idea that providing training, counseling, drug and alcohol treatment, and or education to the criminal population while they're incarcerated is automatically going to result in reduced recidivism. By reducing recidivism, we reduce the inmate population and ultimately save taxpayer dollars. That's the spiel that was sold to many state legislatures, and they ate it up. To be fair, I've seen some of these rehabilitative programs work. However, it isn't based on the program or the inmate's access to it. It's based on the inmate's desire to engage the program and then take those lessons learned and apply them to their lives post-incarceration. Very few are ready and or able to do this. The old adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, is the perfect analogy for the concept of rehabilitation in correctional settings. Next, you have the misconception of what the public believes jails and corrections departments do while inmates are in custody. I'm sure you've heard of the gladiator fights by inmates or of inmates staged by correctional officers in California prisons, which turned out to be false, by the way. Or maybe you heard of some of the ongoing litigation brought by California inmates that have been sensationalized by national news to make it seem that inmates are suffering. They're suffering from overcrowding and inadequate medical and mental health care. This next clip will show you just how much suffering many inmate populations endure.
Hey everybody, first of all, welcome all the guests that came in today to be with us.
Days like today really prepare you for that transitioning towards freedom.
Come over here,
What we have is an event with staff and inmates, and the theme of it is bridging the gap. So, as you can see, we have staff and inmates engaging, having lunch together, having some games, interacting with each other, just to get that, that normalcy going on that California model is.
It took a long time and organization to get this event going, but it's really a dream come true, to be honest with you, because I have not seen in my population in custody play games or even talk to each other for longer periods of time.
It's something that's long overdue, but we're also transitioning from almost an us versus them culture that we've worked into to realizing that rehabilitation is interacting with people as people.
Well, I'm sure that days like this have to happen because I think when we work in these institutions, we're so used to seeing things a certain way.
The highly sensationalized and inaccurate representation of care and treatment in jails and prisons today pulls on the heartstrings of the public, which adds to the misconception of inmates' care and treatment while in custody. Much of this belief stems from news media and Hollywood. Movies, TV shows, and the news often portray criminals and inmates as regular Joes, and they have heartbreaking stories that tap into the sympathetic emotions of the public. What these movies, TV shows, and news presentations don't tell you, however, is the level of suffering and loss that the victims of these crimes have to deal with. The idea that had you been in their position, you would have done the same thing is the message that's being promoted to garner sympathy and ultimately endorsement of their misbehavior. The problem here is that this messaging blurs the line between what's acceptable behavior and what's not. As such, the distinction between what is criminal and what is victim is also blurred. Which brings me to empathy, the understanding and sharing of feelings of another. This feeling of empathy that people have distorts rational thinking regarding criminality. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, everyone deserves a second chance. However, what you're not being told is that most individuals who are in custody have had extensive criminal histories that are increasing in severity and frequency. The idea of a second chance was likely provided by their initial run-ins with law enforcement, the courts, and then probation. After being afforded numerous second chances, there comes a time where you just need to pay the piper and suffer the consequences of your misbehavior. Especially if that misbehavior is of a serious or violent nature. And along that same vein, these same people also believe that criminals need empathy because of the stigma of being incarcerated. I'm sure you've heard of the stories that ex-cons can't find work and as a result have to resume their criminal behavior in order to survive. That's just BS. It's going to be hard to find gainful, or rather, is it going to be hard to find gainful employment after incarceration? Absolutely. But that same struggle is being felt by high school and college graduates entering the workforce, and just about anybody entering the workforce who doesn't have an extensive work history. And finally, we look at the public's view of the criminal justice system as a whole. Some people believe that the system disproportionately affects marginalized people. In truth, we do see higher incarceration rates for minorities and the poor. However, much of this stems from upbringing, not their financial situation. Take a look at the extremely poor communities in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. In fact, the poorest place in the United States is McDowell County in West Virginia. Many of these people in these communities belong to homes that have loving and supporting parents. They are families that are engaged with one another and have laid a solid moral and ethical foundation for their kids to grow from. This dynamic is missing from most poor inner city neighborhoods. And this is the one thing that empathy and tax dollars will not fix. The problem with the public's view and the growing trend of viewing incarcerated and post-incarcerated criminals as victims is that it undermines our entire criminal justice system and the legitimate traumatic experiences of victims. Until we move back to a place where personal accountability, punishment, and public safety are the primary focus of corrections departments, and these same departments provide clear transparency of the mechanisms they use to ensure public safety, we will have a contingent of the public that will diminish the culpability of criminality and continue to view victims, or rather criminals, as victims. This concludes today's presentation of Office of the Patriot. If you enjoyed the content, please take the time to like, subscribe, and share my channel on your social media. It is appreciated. And as always, have a blessed day and stay safe out there.